Do you know that you literally cannot play a wrong note? It's impossible. You can't do it. Okay, maybe in some contexts you kind of can, but here's what I'm talking about. There's this idea in harmony that once you understand how to actually use it and how to apply it in your own playing, it'll unlock so many doors for you, and that is basically the following. No matter what note you play, any single note on this entire keyboard, it will serve a function in literally any chord you can possibly play. So what that means is if I take something simple like a C, I can make that fit in literally any chord. It does not matter what the chord is. C is a correct note in some version of a chord in every single key. So this is where the concept of like there are no wrong notes comes into play. And this is actually a really great exercise in harmony and understanding chords and upper extensions and how things go together and how you can make alterations to chords to literally make any note work. So we're gonna do this practice in C, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about how it might actually be applicable. So here's how it's gonna work. We're gonna take a chord in every single key. We're just gonna apply C somehow to that chord. And then we're gonna figure out what C is in that chord. And that will show you that it doesn't matter what note you're playing or what chord you hit, there's a function somewhere. Okay, let's demonstrate this really quick. So first we're just gonna take C and we're gonna apply it to C. Easy. It can be major, it can be minor. It doesn't matter what it is because C is simply the root of a C chord, whether it's major or minor or anything else. Cool, that one's easy. Well, let's move on. We're just gonna go right up the scale chromatically, and now we have D flat. How do those two go together? Well, this one's also pretty easy because we can just make a D flat major 7 chord, and the C is the 7th degree of the D major scale. I'm sorry, D flat major scale. There it is, right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the major 7th in D flat. So we can make a D flat major 7th chord, and that works perfectly. Is there any way else we could fit this into D flat? Sure, if we turn the whole chord minor and we keep that major 7th on there, we have a minor major 7th chord, which is a very nice chord to use as well. Sits very nicely just as its own home base. Even if we flip it minor, it still works just as its own home base again. Cool, that one's pretty easy. Let's keep on going. Here's D natural. Well, what is C relative to D natural? That's the D major scale, but what is C then? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, there's no C. We're gonna have to take that C sharp and make it flat. So we have a flat 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. And that brings us back to D. So in D major, that's just simply going to create a dominant chord. It's going to create a D7 chord. Very, very easy, very, very commonly used. Most of the time we'll see it used as a 5/5 chord leading back to a home bass. Right? So we have maybe a 2-5-1. Very simple, very easy to use. That C goes with the D perfectly. Now it could go with something that's not major. Maybe it's not dominant. Maybe it's a minor chord, in which case it's a flat 7th of a minor chord. So just a D minor 7, which is what this would be. So as you can see, oh God, relative to C natural, that D can be used in a couple of different applications that work really well and are pretty simple to use. Okay, so far we've gone through C, D flat, and D, and we still have found no way that C doesn't work perfectly in some version of a chord based on each of those notes. Let's keep moving on. Here's E flat. This one, again, pretty simple, because if we take an E flat major scale, we find out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. C is the naturally occurring 6th within the E flat major scale. So nicely used with an E flat 6 chord, just a major chord with the added 6. That's it. It's pretty simple to use in that context, and it works really well. It also can apply to a number of different versions of this chord. Let's take that E flat major, and now we're gonna make it minor. Now let's add that 6th back in. Woo! Now we've got ourselves an E flat minor 6 chord, another really great chord. E flat minor 6, 9. That E flat minor 6 chord works really nicely even as its own home bass. We've used it with major, we've used it with minor. What about a dominant application? It works great. It's literally an E flat 7. Well, this would technically, let's see, what would it be? It's an E flat 13 chord, pretty much, because... Also, side note, in case you guys were ever confused about this, those larger numbers, 9, 11, and 13, they're just the octaves of 2, 4, and 6, right? Because watch this. Let's take E flat. 1, 2, so that's F, 2 is F. 3, 4, 4 is A flat. 5, 6, 6 is C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, now we're playing F again. That was 2. 10, 11. Well, that was A flat, which was 4. 12, 13, that was C. So when we say like 9, 11, and 13, it's kind of the same thing as saying like 2, 4, and 6, just up an octave outside of that first initial octave of the scale, which is why we call them upper extensions, because they're outside of that first octave. And the 9, the 11, and the 13 are the most common ones that we get to alter, because they're not the primary chord tones of 1, 3, 5, and maybe 1, 3, 5, 7. Those are the primary chord tones. Those 2, 4, and 6, or 9, 11, and 13 offer us all kinds of opportunities to make adjustments to them. If we keep those chord tones the same, we can create all kinds of different sounds by changing these upper extensions. You get into a bunch of weird sounds. And that's actually how we're going to make C apply in an interesting way here, because instead of just calling it the 6, we're now considering it the 13. And we get this really nice dominant sound, very bluesy. Really nice usage in a blues application. So you can kind of see with talking about those upper extensions, like all of a sudden, these notes, 9, 11, and 13, or 2, 4, and 6, up an octave, become really useful. Notice how like when we were using C on C, well, it's just the root. That's really all you can do with it. Even when it's the 7th in D flat, it's still like, you can do a couple different things with it, but as soon as we start talking about those commonly used upper extensions that get altered to create all kinds of different sounds, now these notes start to become really, really useful. As evidenced by when we put it into E. Well, this is a bit of an odd one, right? Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, that's the E major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The C doesn't exist in the major scale at E, so we have to make an alteration in order for it to even be there. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, if we drop that to the C, we get a flat 6. That's the only way we can actually include C in the E scale or in the E world, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means that whatever chord we come up with has got to be a flat 6. Remember, up an octave, flat 13. So this was probably going to be used as some kind of, how would I use it? Maybe an E dominant. What else would I do here? What would I do maybe with the 9? What about a sharp 9? That's kind of cool. That's a neat chord, right? And think about where that might go, right? That's a neat sound. That C against the E dominant chord is a really nice sound, functioning as that flat 13, which you can apply in a number of different ways. This was just one way that you could use it. But still, we have not found a context in which C can't be used as something, right? And we're already up to E now. Let's keep going. How about F? Well, that one's just easy. It's the 5th of F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so like, you know, you can do a whole, yeah, it can be major, it can be minor, it can be major 7th, minor 7th, dominant, sure, but it's just the 5th, which means, is it particularly interesting? Not as much, but it obviously is it's a primary chord tone, so it works perfectly. Now let's move on again. How about G flat? Ah, the tritone. This is... Fun fact, did you know that the tritone is the only symmetrical division of the octave? Because a major scale is not symmetrical. We look at 1, 5, 1 as being like, oh, that's how you cut it in half, but yet, that's a 5th, and then a 4th. That's not symmetrical at all. But if you take a tritone, that's a tritone, that's also a tritone. It's the only like symmetrical division of the octave. Anyway, so how does this tritone actually make something that sounds good, that's actually sensible to our ears, in the key of G flat? How about that, right? That right there is a G flat major 7 with a sharp 11. Now let's go back to our thing about upper extensions, right? Let's take a G flat major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that C wasn't there. We've got to change something, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 4th degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if we make that sharp, there's our C. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4. Well, 4, go up an octave, is the same as 11. So we could call this a major 7th chord with a sharp 11. It's a beautiful sound, absolutely gorgeous. How else could we use it? Would this work in a dominant context? You betcha, works perfectly as a dominant chord. Same function, sharp 11, just dominant instead of major. Totally different usage, but it still works. And it works in multiple ways, which tells you even when it's a tritone from the root of whatever chord you're playing, it's still not wrong. Moving on, let's go to G. Okay, so G, and then we take the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the 4th or the 11th in G, okay? How does that work? Well, with a major chord, you definitely can have like a sus voicing. In fact, sus is probably the way we're gonna want to use this. Oh, that is such a beautiful sound. I'm using a sus, like a sus, I don't know, 11, sus 9, sus 13. Just add all the upper extensions in there, who cares? You can do all kinds of stuff. Right, so, but it's the 4th, it's the 11th, it works great. You can use it on a sus chord. You can probably find all kinds of different usages for it. I'm sure it would work on a dominant chord. Yeah, in some way, I bet. Yeah, of course. Still, not wrong. A flat, moving on. Easy. This is the major 3rd in A flat. 1, 2, 3 in the major scale. 4, 5, 6, 7. That one's kind of a no-brainer. Works perfectly. We only have 3 notes left, and so far nothing has been wrong. How about A? This one's an easy one. If we take the A major scale, 1, 2, 3, well, that's not it. We made that flat. Flat 3, which is a minor sound. C is the minor 3rd of A minor. Very, very useful, obviously, as a minor chord, but check this out. It can also be used in a dominant chord, right? Check that out, right? So we have the major 3rd and the minor 3rd, which in this case we might call a sharp 9. So that can even be used as a minor chord or even as a dominant chord. It's just like, it's so hard to make any note sound wrong. It's just too easy. There are too many options for every single note to work with every single chord. 2 more, let's look at B flat. It's the major 9th. 1, 2, or the 2nd, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Can be used as a major chord. Minor chord. It's beautiful. I mean, the 9th is just such a gorgeous interval anyway. When you take those major chords and you make them minor, oof, still not wrong. In fact, it's just all too right. Perfect. There it is again. Easy. It's easy to make every single note work with any chord you want. Let's do the last one, B. How on earth are we gonna make this work? Well, it's a little bit hairy, a little bit weird, but we could just use it. Let's see. It's just a flat 9. It's a flat 9. That's all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Flat. Feels like it wants to resolve, right? But in context, it makes perfect sense. We have just taken every single key, and talked about different chords where one note works for all of them. Here's the last trick. If you understand this, you won't care about sounding bad ever again, because you'll know any note you play, if it sounds wrong, if it sounds unpleasant at any given time, then probably literally a half step up or down will sound right. So let's go back to that stupid example I gave in the beginning where I played. Okay, obviously it's like, oh, really? That doesn't quite sound right. But what did I do to change it that way? Well, I just took the original melody and just pulled it down a half step, right? So all we'd have to do in that case is just move it a half step again. Works perfect. What if we moved it down a half step from that wrong note? Because that would not be the original melody. That'd be something new entirely. That still works! Like, it's not obviously it's not correct. It's not what the Moonlight Sonata actually is at that particular moment, but that note works perfectly fine. We played a wrong note that didn't sound right to us. Now, could we make an argument for that G working perfectly fine in some type of C sharp minor chord? Clearly, we just illustrated all of that. But in this case, we know that, well, it's not exactly the melody that we wanted to portray at that given moment. Yet, we were only a half step away from something that sounded perfectly correct, whether it was the original or not. Understanding this about harmony and about your playing can really help to unlock and tear down this barrier of like, I'm afraid to sound bad. I'm afraid to start improvising because I just don't want to sound bad. I don't want to play something that isn't correct. Everything's correct, right? And if it's not correct, like it doesn't sound the way you want it to, it's only a half step away from the right note. Understanding this on a fundamental level will help you unlock a whole freedom of just feeling like you can try things and feeling like you can just take these ideas and go, oh, well, what would happen if I played this note instead? Try this. Try sitting down and taking one note and taking a different note and saying, how can these go together? Well, there we go. That's very nice. You can test this out with any note and any root of a chord and develop that chord in such a way that that note works. It's all the keys to understanding harmony, which will help you understand improvisation much better and be more willing to take chances and to do things that you previously might not have because you were afraid that you might screw it up or play the wrong notes or sound bad. All of that is nonsense. Like, you can play anything you want. And then over time, you practice these ideas and it helps you to understand, oh, well, I've seen this before, and I know that if I take this root, I can create this sound that I like. It's not about playing random notes. It's about feeling that freedom so you can discover the things that you do like. In fact, that's like the main thing we focus on in the Intro to Improvisation course over on the Cornell Music Academy. Because so often, like, that barrier of like not wanting to play because you're just afraid to start, because you don't know where to start and you've never done it before. Like, this was me. I specifically remember being in this position. And the very first thing I thought was like, man, I've worked so hard to sound correct. I don't want to sound not correct. That's like why I put the whole course together, to like get people playing immediately, get you playing with a backing track in a guided way that's like, hey, here's a bank of notes that you can use, try this, and then step away from that. And here's all kinds of examples that might help to trigger your ears to say, ooh, I like that sound. I want to explore that sound a little more. And the course is like literally packed with, there's backing tracks and there's tons of exercises, which is kind of counterintuitive when we're talking about improvisation, just because like you're obviously making it up as you go, but the exercises are just to give you those ideas that you might cling to, and you might say, ooh, that sound is nice, I want to develop that. There's tons of exercises and actionable steps, as well as downloadable resources and PDFs and backing tracks that you can use to play on your own. And then there's a ton of videos of guided instruction to help you kind of shift your thinking about improvisation and start to focus on, okay, how can I actually start to apply these things in a way that doesn't scare me and doesn't make me feel like I'm going to sound wrong or bad. That is like the whole reason I wanted to put this Intro to Improv course together, and so you can break that barrier and finally start using some of this material. So if you want to check it out, the link is in the description. You can go check out the Intro to Improvisation course. If you don't feel like you're ready for that, there's also the Intro to Piano course, which that'll take you from literally not having started anything at all if you've ever wanted to learn how to play piano, and it'll take you at least to having a tool set, understanding how this instrument works, how to use your fingers, how to get these notes playing together in a way that now you can take that toolkit and start to work on other things that you've always wanted to play. All that stuff is available down in the description. Be sure to check it out. It's the best way you can support the channel, and I'm so thankful for you guys who have gone and bought courses already. It really does a ton to help us out, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for checking out this video. I really appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next one.